Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. My name is Janie and welcome back. And today I have Miss Jessica Falcon with me, and we are talking all about embodiment and unconditional love and divine feminine energy and all that good stuff. Jessica was a criminal attorney, and she went down a journey of spirituality. And so now she is a spiritual mystic who help other people on their journey. So welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you, Jane. I'm so excited to be here with you, and it's such a
Yes, I'm
pleasure.
yes, I'm so excited. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then how did you get here, and then we'll jump into some other questions.
So, currently, I'm an international soul embodiment guide who guides women in particular to reclaim their sovereignty because we were sovereign before. We were free, and that was taken away when the
Yeah.
feminine was no longer recognized as divine. And I never in a million years thought I would be doing this kind of work. It's something that I have come into, that my soul has guided me into from clearly a very different past, a very different career than before. And it's only through, and I'll talk a little bit more about that transition, but it's only through that deep listening and surrender that I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be having this conversation with you. I think it's needed. So, first of all, for people that don't know, what is sovereignty? What is that? And what is that for women, since you said it was lost?
Mhm. Sovereignty, when I talk about sovereignty, I talk about soul sovereignty.
Okay.
And for me, to be sovereign is to recognize and embody your divinity so that you live from the knowingness that you are your own authority. You
Hmm.
source love from within, safety from within, belonging and worth from within. You know who you are. And so you choose for you. And you can only choose for you when you know you. So this is about reclaiming the self in love so that you are truly living from the inside out. You're not
Hmm.
taking the outside world in and making it your own, which is what we're taught to do, right? To see ourselves through the eyes of others. Sovereignty is you see yourself through your own eyes.
Hmm.
You know who you are and you live from that place.
So, living from within to without, right?
Yes, from
Okay.
within to without, and from inside out. So you are radiating your light, you're in your power, you're speaking your truth from the
Hmm.
heart.
In your opinion, how did women specifically women, lose this?
So this is
Because
my
you said
whole book.
you help people reclaim it. So anything that we're reclaiming is something we've always had, right? But either we lost it or someone else claimed it. So how have women lost this?
Hmm.
Specifically women,
I
in your
love this
opinion.
question. Yeah. So I'll give a very short answer because I've literally written an entire book about this. It's going to come out hopefully in the next year, year and a half, called The Power of Eve. But the
Okay.
short version is around 5,000 years ago, 5 to 7,000 years ago, there's this massive shift that took place on the planet. And a male sky god was deemed to rule supreme over all others. And we were no longer allowed to worship the earth as goddess. We were no longer allowed to recognize the body as holy. We were no longer allowed to recognize life as sacred. And at that time, that shift took place, and this took several thousand years. Women were no longer recognized as divine. And that is when women were turned into literal possessions that could be
Mhm.
owned and traded and
Mhm.
dominated because men were granted, quote, divine authority by this new sky god to rule over women. And that
Okay.
created the ability to possess and choose for women. And so women were no longer allowed to choose for themselves, whereas they had been. They
Mhm.
had been allowed to own property, to earn money, to work in the temples, to be priestesses. And they were
Mhm.
literally ripped out and enslaved and prostituted. And women were no longer allowed to choose. And in order to effectuate that denial of choice, women were no longer allowed to earn money, to work, to own property, to
Mhm.
divorce. Of course, marriage, when this initially happened, wasn't even a thing. But later in
Mhm.
time, we created these laws that made it legal for a man to rape his wife, that allowed only him to choose.
Mhm. So this sky god, who is this? Or in your opinion, or in your history and your research, who was this sky god? And how was this sky god so clever that this has persisted for so many thousands of years?
Mm-hmm. It's such a, again, fascinating question because so the research or the history and archaeological excavations show that it took at least 2,000 years to bury the goddess underground.
Mhm.
And so this was not an easy thing. Like this clever sky god
Right.
wasn't like people were immediately saying, "Yeah, we agree with you. Yes, we only worship the sky god." I'm going to back up for a second to give a little more context because at the time this shift initially took place, I'm referring specifically right now to ancient Sumer, which is in modern day Iraq, which is the most advanced civilization we have written records of. We have found and discovered on this planet. I'm sure there were more, but this is what we have discovered that was monumental architecture and advanced math systems and sewage and water systems. This was back in 5 to 4,000 BC was the prime. So when this civilization, they worshipped a sky god alongside the earth goddess, alongside an air
Mhm.
god, alongside a water goddess, alongside, right? So every element was personified as a deity, as a divinity, not
Mhm.
because they thought that was a person, but because they knew the elements create life,
Mhm.
and therefore they were worshiping the elements like, oh, if I don't have water, I don't live. Thank you, water. I'm going to worship you. If I don't have the earth, I can't have a body. I can't live. So I'm going to worship you. And they personified the elements to make them accessible to the human mind, right?
Right. Right.
And so having a sky god wasn't new. What was new is that suddenly only the sky god could be worshipped, and none of the other elements, meaning none of the other gods or goddesses, could be worshipped. And we could go down a little rabbit hole about where the sky god comes
I
from.
know there's a lot of rabbit holes, but we're gonna try to stay on track.
But
I
we're
know
going to
it's
stay on this.
yeah,
And
yeah.
essentially, it took massive warfare and violence to suppress the goddess, to
Mhm.
suppress the feminine. And there are even statements that in history and in the Bible that show how much people really resisted this because it turned this abundant sacred life into horror and violence and killing. and
Mhm.
and it was through this warfare, through this being forced, women were raped for the first time that we really know about, and were forced into this. So clever, sure, or just violent, and
Right.
clearly not aligned with love, clearly not aligned with the heart.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. You were a criminal lawyer, right?
Criminal
For many
prosecutor.
years.
Hmm.
So how did you end up here?
Yeah, quite a transition from what we're just talking about, right? To being a lawyer.
I said we was gonna back up a little bit.
so, so I became a lawyer to do women's rights. And I've been passionate about women's rights since I was a little girl. I grew up in South Carolina, and I always heard and was told that I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things or be powerful or be intelligent or be strong because of my sex. And I knew from a very young age that was not my truth and that God was not outside of me. I felt God, divine, source, universe, whatever you want to call it, inside of me, in my own heart. in my own soul. I felt that. And I knew no one could tell me otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really resisted and ended up doing women's rights work for 10 plus years, fierce advocate for women's rights. And part of that was going to law school because as a woman at the time, I went to law school in 2003. So at the time, I felt if I have a law degree behind my name, people are more likely to listen to me,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately true as
Mm-hmm.
women, right? Men
And it's
don't
a part
need
of the
degrees.
programming. Yeah, it's a part of the programming as well. That we
Exactly.
need these things to feel validated or to be heard and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
were you told these things in your childhood? Was this something in your home? Where did this come from? Where did this voice that,
Resistance.
yeah, where did, or the voice that said, Jessica, you're a woman, you can't do this. Jessica, you're a woman, you're not, you shouldn't do this. Where did that come from in your upbringing?
I really feel like it came from everywhere. I wasn't we didn't go to church growing up all the time. I occasionally did. There was a point in my middle school years when I got really involved in an acting group in the church and was going regularly. Other than that, it came from the church, but it was at school. I had teachers tell me these things. I It didn't come from my mom. Um, Her strength translated to me. I always saw my mom as a very strong woman
Mm-hmm.
who would say I don't need a man but at the same time I saw her in unhealthy relationship dynamics
Okay.
and and I just well, even working at the governor's office in Capitol Hill when I was in college, I mean just the sexual um I don't want to say abuse, but the objectification and the comments, and women were cast into different positions. I saw it everywhere I went. Only women were teachers and secretaries, and only men were serving as judges. And even in the courtroom, almost all of the judges were men. And it just I just saw it everywhere. It was just part of the experience. We turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you look at a magazine, women's bodies are objectified. Typically men's weren't, especially 20 years ago. They are more and more, unfortunately. I don't think we should be objectifying everybody
Right.
to heal the objectification of women, right? We need to heal this split between body and soul to end the objectification to begin with. But yeah, so really from everywhere. But it was
Okay.
my heart and soul that were saying, this doesn't feel true for me.
Yeah. And was that truth a knowing from childhood, or was it more so as you got out into the world and into the courtrooms and what you were seeing? Or did you always somehow know that there's something different about me specifically?
I always felt it. Now, I can't pinpoint like an exact moment. I always felt God in my heart
Okay.
from as young as I can remember. There are moments, particularly after I became a prosecutor, my spiritual awakening really started consciously, which I'm happy to talk about. But when I was younger, it was a fierce devotion to women and to soul, even though I didn't even know what to call it.
Mm-hmm. I get
But I was
that.
very disconnected from my body. I mean, I wasn't connected to my body. I wasn't connected to my wisdom. I still didn't know how to speak my truth. I still didn't know how to feel my feelings because I was always told they were bad. And so I felt this deep inner turmoil ever since
Mm-hmm.
I was young between what I was told and what I felt, between being not being allowed to feel and yet having such strong feelings,
Yeah.
between what and my soul was asking me, but what I was seeing in the world. And I felt this huge disconnect and turmoil at that.
Yeah, and it's a battle because when you're not doing what your soul is telling you to do, you're going to have that internal struggle. So, how did you go from being in your industry for 10 years and then having an awakening? How did you transition? How did you do that? How were you in this courtroom amongst all these people who you feel very disconnected to on a soul level, and then say, I'm going to follow my soul's journey and do this? How did you do it? Because I think
Mhm.
it's so important to talk about that, because most people who come into an awakening, their reality shatters. It literally shatters. And you have to figure out, how do I put the pieces together with this new reality, with this new knowledge, with this knowing, with this soul walk? How do I do that? So, how did you specifically transition?
Mhm. So the my reality did shatter, and then I still stayed in the one I was in until I eventually surrendered to the soul calling. But it took me time because I resisted it. And looking back, I can see I resisted it because I was so scared. I was so scared because I was giving more validation to the external world than my inner truth.
Mhm.
And I was allowing myself to cling to external forms of safety and security rather than finding security within my own divinity, within my own self, within my own soul. And so it's been quite a path because I started waking up more consciously, because I think we're all on a spiritual path, right? But whether or not we're consciously on it. So
Correct.
started consciously getting into meditation in 2008 when I had a flood that literally destroyed almost everything I owned overnight in a matter of hours. And I suddenly am going, why? And this was 2 years into practicing law. So this wasn't even, I hadn't even been practicing that long. And I started going, oh, I just bought a house at 25. I think I'm going on the straight path of success.
Mhm.
I'm on that track. And suddenly I'm asking, why am I doing this? And for who am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? Why do I want this? Right? All the questioning, because we have to question to be sovereign. We have to question to come out of the matrix, this paradigm that we're in. We cannot get out if we do not question absolutely everything.
That's so true.
So I start questioning. And then year later, almost to the like, well, a year and a month later, I was in a bicycle accident that could have killed me, but instead ripped a metal chain into my chin and left me temporarily deformed. And I remember the moment I went into the half bath. I was at my mom's house. She was helping take care of me. And I looked in the mirror and I took off the bandage. I was all alone. And I see this deformed face for the first time because I hadn't even looked at myself because I could barely move. And then I jumped back in horror of like, what is this? And who is this? And then
Mhm.
my eyes looked at themselves in the mirror and I saw the same soul in my eyes. I saw me in my eyes. And my eyes are looking back at me as I'm looking in them. And it was this, I am not my body. I
Mm.
am not my body. And it just filtered into every cell. And I knew in that moment that I am eternal. And I felt it. I felt that even though my body is a vessel, is a temple, is an amazing gift, my
Mhm.
soul is so much more. And so that shifted my reality again into, well, then how do I live from this place? How do I live as this and go to work as an attorney and literally put people in jail as my job? And how do I then act from this? And so again, very short version is then coming into more meditation, emotional release. I just started focusing on healing myself first and accessing the deeper emotions and the primal emotions and the primal self through that process over about 2.5 to 3 years.
Mhm.
I just knew that the disconnect between what I was doing physically and my soul was too great to bear. And I could no longer do it. I could no longer. And so here's where I resisted because I knew this. And I tried to make a compromise with soul, but
Mm,
the soul does not like compromises. I
mm.
learned very quickly.
Yeah, this
And
is so good because
hmm
it's really the path. It really is the path. And you literally feel a tearing apart on the inside that the outside is not aligned. It's not
hmm
aligned with what my soul, my higher self wants me to do. And
hmm
it could be a battle if you don't surrender. I love that you use that word.
hmm hmm And it's a battle because we're afraid. Like, what do we fight? We fight what we fear. We
True.
control what we fear. We don't fight what we love, right? We fight what we're afraid of.
That's
Even
so
in a
true.
relationship, like even though we love the person, we're not fighting the person, we're fighting that we're afraid of something that they're doing or saying. We're fighting that. We're afraid they're not loving us enough. We're fighting that. We're not fighting the person, right?
True. That's so true. It is. We fight what we are afraid of. And when when you are at a level of consciousness where all you can relate to is the physical material world, and that is your world. And like you said, you were not even connected to your body. You rejected your emotions, or you suppressed your emotions, or you because it didn't go with the programming of the external world. So you fear, well, I got to listen to what's inside and not what's outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge process when you have lived your life on a very external, material, physical plane.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
So you eventually clearly surrender. And do you just completely stop practicing law? Do you try to put yourself in a position that's more aligned with love, with helping people that's in the justice system? How did you do it?
So again, like I'm a writer, so I tend to want to just explain every little detail. But the short version is that I my compromise was, well, I'll create the first holistic law firm in Charlotte, and I will bridge the law, the responsible worldly thing, the thing I've spent 14 years cultivating and studying, with my soul. And so I will do this by creating a holistic avenue for people who truly want to come out of what they're experiencing into something else. I'll be the coach, I'll be the lawyer, I'll create this capacity and education and training. So I started that whole process, and
Mhm.
it was not what my soul wanted me to do. It was my way of holding on to a sense of security and a sense of responsibility, right? I'm being responsible according to societal standards. I struggled with that for so long, which I think so many people do. Well, I have to be responsible. And ultimately, I came to, well, what am I responsible to?
Mhm.
Am I
Mhm.
responsible to this other person's expectation? Am I responsible to this other person's desire for me? Am I responsible to societal standards? Am I responsible to my soul? I am responsible to my soul.
And
It
that
knows
is
way more.
and that is the single reason why we are here in this earth classroom. And I
Mhm,
think that if we could prioritize spirit and soul over body and material, it'll be easy.
mhm,
It'll be super easy. But that is not how the world works currently. I feel like we're going into the golden age, and I think that, more people are awakening to this knowledge. But if you could understand, and these are people that's listening to this podcast, that your single duty in this physical body is to learn soul lessons on a soul level. And those are things you cannot see. Those are things you can feel. Those are things you can experience in your body. Those are things you can be in service of to other people, but it is not the physical material world. And when you have that flipped, at some point, you are going to come to a hard stop. And I use this example a lot, Jessica. I say, spirit will tap you on the shoulder. Okay. And if spirit can't get your attention, spirit may slap you in the face, right? If that doesn't get the attention, then a brick is going to come down. It's like you get little nudges to wake you up. And some of us are very sound asleep, and it takes a lot to just start questioning. Like Jessica said, like just start questioning. But eventually you'll get to the point where you can't turn around and you have to stop. And I've been grateful that I have always listened to my inner self. I mean, when I get something, I'm stopping and I'm waiting and I'm listening and I'm looking and I'm seeing, okay, this is a fork in the road. I need to make a decision versus not listening. And I've been so grateful because I think our suffering comes because we're disconnected to that inner voice and that inner soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, the reason, absolutely, truth to everything you just said. And the reason that I know for myself and what I see in clients that we want to hold on, right? We want to put all the external above and on top of the soul voice and the soul truth because we're so afraid. We have been taught that love comes from outside of us, that security comes from outside of us, that our worth is based on what we do or what other people think of us. And so this is where it requires so much compassion for ourselves through this process of literally, because sovereignty, right? It's pulling your power back from all external sources. We cannot be sovereign until we do this work to bring it back, to bring it back, to bring it back. And so the soul, even when we wake up, even after we're awake, I mean, I've been on, I mean, it's what 15, 16 years now, and I'm still continuously being asked to trust deeper levels of what I know when I can't see it, I can't grasp it, I can't understand it with my mental mind. And I have to continuously surrender into my soul, into the truth of who I am, not let the external world dictate who that is or the limitations or what is possible. But the truth of who I am is beyond this physicality. And yet I access the truth of who I am through my body, through my physicality, because the body is a communication device for the soul. And when we connect within, we hear the voice of our soul. And when we're not hearing it, it's because we're not connected to our body.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't hear that if we're not in the body.
Yeah. And that is so true. There's a lot of people who are very disconnected from their body. I mean, simple things like if you're running a fever, simple things like, like a common cold, a sinus infection, simple things, even women with their womb. And I say simple because I've had a lot of study in the healthcare field. So some of this stuff to me seems simple, but I have studied it too. But and that is the first step. You have to be connected to your body because the truth is the body is actually the conduit. You're the conduit between heaven, which is the non-physical, and earth, which is the physical. And that you're the bridge through the body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So without that connection or a relationship to your body, you're going to be very disconnected to one or the other. You're going to be disconnected from earth or you're going to be disconnected from heaven, one or the other. And I use heaven as non-physical. I like to say that because it's not using a religious sense. So Jessica, what does embodiment mean since we're talking about the body? What does embodiment mean?
Mm-hmm. I have to just really quickly follow up on what you said because it's so
Okay,
related to
yeah, sure.
embodiment. When you were talking about we are the conduit, like the body is the conduit, because this is about related to what I'm going to explain about embodiment itself. The body is the conduit. So That is exactly what we've been told, to only honor the heaven, the spirit. We've been told to only honor the above. So embodiment is honoring the below, the body, the earth. Your body is of the earth. It cannot be separate. But we have believed and damned and dominated the earth because we have damned the feminine as divine. We have damned her and deemed her inferior. And so we have deemed the body inferior also, even though the body itself, every single cell contains the divine. And when we remember this, when we turn our eyes inward to see ourselves through our own eyes, and we connect to the body as a conduit, as a temple, as a portal to the divine within us, that's embodiment, is knowing how to tune in. And then not only knowing how to tune in, but connecting to, not for the purpose of taking, not for the purpose of getting. This is something I made the mistake of at the beginning of my own embodiment journey, is I would go into my body to try to get an answer, to try to get something, to try to understand something, to try to clear something, to release an emotion. I would want to, I'm going to go in and get rid of this anger. I'm going to go in and get rid of this grief. I'm going to go in and heal myself. And instead of connecting the wisdom with everything that I've experienced in my body through my connection to, I'm coming in to be present with, to bring love to reunite to this within me, this experience, this feeling, this truth, this power, this knowing that needs to be seen, that wants to be felt. Not to get rid of it, but truly to be with it. And the magic is that that presence is what transforms it back into truth, back into soul. And so embodiment is building the capacity to tune into and connect with your divinity in and through your body by sitting with what is, with curiosity, with your heart open, with pure devotion to this vessel and this truth that lives within you.
I totally agree. And I see embodiment as being it. So if I know that unconditional love is what my true higher self is, I need to embody unconditional love in everything, in all ways. So in speaking to you, in dealing with my house and my spouse and my children, in my business, in everything that I do, I am embodying that unconditional love. And I
Absolutely.
think it's hard. Embodiment is not easy. I had this conversation yesterday because we could know that the soul is, you're to be unconditional love, but to act that way is not easy, right? Because we see people not doing that every day. You're cutting people off in traffic, you're cursing people out, you're sharing things that are not lovely, right? To embody is to do it, to be it. You have transformed into it. Not when it's convenient, not when you're talking to certain people. No, I have aligned every aspect of my being with this truth. And that's how I see embodiment. Because you, like you said, you embodied it when it was what you wanted to do. I'm angry, so I'm going to just be angry. I'm going to put anger into my body and I'm going to go off on whoever's next that's coming in the door. And that is I call it distortions, right? When we use it when we want to use it. But I think it's a true transformation. Like you have become this thing, this knowledge, this being.
And to tie that to what you said earlier, it is the process of that soul discovery, because it's not that the soul has this end goal, right? It's not that we're like, we're here to be perfect. We're
Nope.
here to experience. We're here to feel. And so the soul, when we tune into the body, I highly recommend a daily practice of tuning in, a moment to moment practice ultimately of tuning in, that we tune into what is present, what is alive, what is my soul voice, what is my heart, what is my body asking of me, telling me, showing me, so that we use that moment by moment to then live accordingly, to act accordingly, to speak accordingly. It's not a right or wrong. It's not a filter through the mind all the time and decide if the mind's in agreement. It's a trust. It's a union that's developed through devotion and time and consistency
Mhm.
of, I am aware of and feeling the truth of my soul, which is love, which is abundance, which is power, which is truth at all times. And then you use the word aligning, which I love that word,
Mhm.
then aligning everything to that truth in every moment. And here's where the kicker gets, though, is that we have these ideas about love in our mental mind that are
Mhm.
not often actually love.
No.
Like when we tell ourselves, I have to be nice versus speaking a soul truth, right?
Correct. 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 And I have always said we could do and say anything in love, and we could speak truth in love. And sometimes, truth is hard to say, but I think you could say it in a loving way, right? Because if I
Mm-hmm.
come to you in truth and in love, I could say whatever I need to say to you.
Mm-hmm.
But that is checking in. And you mentioned, because I think we have to check in here and not here. But we have to align that too. We have to
Mm-hmm.
align minds and we have to align heart in alignment. But I do believe that the check-in is with the heart.
Mm-hmm. I I ultimately will let the heart soul be the guide. And I also, as you said, the alignment of the mind, body, and heart is very
Yep.
important, because that was one of the things I really got from meditation is, and my years of coming deeper into my body, is my, I felt really guided to, because so many people are just completely controlled by the mind and don't even realize, like, I had no idea how much I was controlled by my mind. And people have all these ruminating thoughts, right? Or we have all these, we're focused on the to do and the this and the that, blah, 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 blah. It's all there. And that all keeps us outside of ourselves. It all keeps us outside of ourselves. And so what I feel so passionate about is bringing this into alignment, so that that's why I work so deeply with bringing the subconscious conscious with my clients and programs, because when we can bring these thoughts down into the heart and then bring what's here up into the mind, we start creating that alignment so that we're acting consciously, which is in love, as love in every moment. Because if we're being run by the mind only, we're disconnected from the soul truth. If we're being run by the body only, the subconscious mind can be ruling the day, which is also not our truth, right? We have to bring it to consciousness, the mind, so that we then
Mhm.
align it to heart, love,
Mhm.
soul. And
Mhm.
so we can, we don't have to let our mind be the master. We master the mind. This is my passion. We master the mind. It doesn't master us. I would say 95+% of people on this planet, the mind masters them. And then what you're doing is you're literally giving your authority away to the mind. This is not sovereignty. In order to be sovereign, you have to master your mind. You have to master your emotions. You have to master yourself. So you are your own authority, because you are conscious, because you are bringing it to the light of awareness, because you are choosing to align every single aspect of who you are to love.
Mhm. I totally agree with that. And I think is honestly the first step on a spiritual journey. Would you agree?
Hmm.
Because I consciousness, being conscious is being aware.
Hmm.
It is actually being aware, it's paying attention. And if you're not asking any questions regarding your life of what's happening, if you're not evaluating the things that's occurring in your life, you're not acting consciously, right? So I do believe that that's one of the first steps in any spiritual journey is just being conscious, right? So it is being aware of those thoughts, sitting there. Most people are not aware of their thoughts. They are completely oblivious, and we have thousands of thoughts that are coming to us every day. Some of them are not even our thoughts.
Mm-mm.
They're the thoughts of others. They're the thoughts of other entities that we
Mhm.
can't see. So there's so much to that. So I totally, totally agree with that for sure. And I think once you're conscious, then you can work in the subconscious to change those thoughts. But
Mhm.
if you're not even conscious of the thoughts, then you can't even because it's like if you're not aware of what's here, you're not aware of what's under there. It's like if you don't see that tree out there, I can't see the roots. 'Cause I don't even see the tree first.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I
Absolutely.
yeah, and then once you get conscious, then you understand the subconscious. Okay, I'm having that same thought and it's a negative thought. Why am I having that same thought? Then I could go underneath to change the programming.
Mhm.
Oh, it happened when I was 7 years old. My mother or my father told me I would never amount to anything. So I have this lack, I have this shame, I have this guilt that keeps me in a negative, low guilt vibration.
Mhm.
And so I'm seeking validation outside of myself. But you can go heal that 7 year old and change that programming that your mother or father told you that you would not be anything.
And that
And that's a lot of
programming
work.
is collective. It's collective because it's yes, the parents, but it's from their parents, from their
Oh,
parents, from their society tells us our worth is
yeah,
valued on the outside of
yeah.
us, right?
It's everything. I mean, I believe, and I think this is why I started questioning was that as a baby, you can't tell me a baby comes into this world in sin. I just can't believe that. No, we're programmed. You give me a race, I'm given a religion, I'm given a culture. I'm told I need to go get an education. I'm told I need to go make X amount of money. I'm told I need to date this type of person. Where this is all given to us.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
think it's a part of the journey because I think it is to be programmed and then unprogram to who you really are.
And this is why I'm so focused on the reclamation of our sovereignty because I believe that when we have been deeply programmed for many thousands of years, and there's a template for us to reclaim, and which we come back to recognizing, remembering, embodying, living as the divine we are, of the sovereign, divine God, goddess, creator in form we are. And it is something that there is a template we can access. And the guides that work through me are very clear on that. I don't know if I could have accessed it without
Mhm,
them guiding me, without them showing me. There's a template. We have help, multidimensional help. We
mhm,
are able to tap into and bring that through our bodies, through
mhm.
our cells, to activate our own soul's remembrance of who we truly are. And we
Yeah,
activate it. We activate it. And then the work is to align everything else to that truth.
that's so true. Because it is a remembering, right? It's already
Mm-hmm.
there. We just have to remember it. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with that. So, Jessica, how are you helping people get here? because it's a journey. And I mean, I'm sure everybody could tell how we're very passionate about this and how it's a, I mean, it's even in this lifetime, you won't figure it all out. The soul goes on and on. So it's so much, and like it just gets deeper and better and more awesome, right? And you just get more in alignment with it. How are you helping people?
Mhm. Well, it's really what you just said. It's coming back home to who
Mhm.
you really are.
Yes.
And the more we do that, my experience of that is the more I do that, the more I expand and deepen into more truth, more love, more ecstasy. It's just amazing. It's amazing. And I love that the light is suddenly shining on my head right
Yes,
now. It's like, woo!
yes. I was gonna,
And
and it's so much bliss, and
mhm,
you could
mhm.
really live there, and
Yes,
and it's true, and it's real, and you don't have to fake it.
yes. Yeah, because you are that. You become it. And so what I do is I work with people to there are various levels. One is just starting out, connect to the voice of your womb, really connect to that voice of your soul. And I have a 22-day activation that helps you really begin to make that connection. And then there are other group programs. One's Embody Your Divinity, really about reclaiming the holiness of your body, voice, and sexuality. And then I can also work one-on-one with women to radically reclaim themselves in love, and with men who want to do the work as well to shift their consciousness, to activate codes of courage. Because men have to do this too, and women want men to do this too. Men have been just as separated from the divine feminine and their bodies and their soul and the divine within as women. The difference is that men still had choice and authority, and that was what was stripped from women.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I have separate programs for men and women,
Mm-hmm.
because it is different what we've been subjected to. It is different. And to deny that is to deny what we need to heal within ourselves to come back into union with the
Mm-hmm.
truth of who we are, because we all have an inner masculine. And we, as you know very well, we all have an inner masculine, we all have an inner feminine. And personally, I really work with my clients and myself, right? Because I embody this path as a priestess. I walk with my clients, right? We walk together. We all walk together, hand in hand, on this path. No one is better than other. We're simply guides. We're showing each other the way, and we're helping each other. And so I really feel that it's about coming into union with the masculine and feminine within, which allows you to come into union with that outside of you
That's
when
the
your
only
soul's
way.
ready.
That's the only way. If you have not balanced your own masculine and feminine energy within, it's going to be, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be difficult to be in a very balanced and harmonious masculine feminine energy without. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to definitely do that work within. What is divine feminine energy to you?
Such a juicy question.
I know. I know, because and I want to say divine, because there's feminine energy, there's toxic feminine energy, there's unhealed feminine energy, and then there's divine feminine energy. So what is divine feminine energy to you?
Mm-hmm. Based on my personal path, here's how I define it. And this is something that I didn't used to define it this way, but from my research, from my own journey,
Mhm.
and the historical context I gave at the beginning of the conversation, I see the true divine feminine as earth,
Mm.
life, body, presence with recognizing the divine in everything, in life, in form, in food, in our experience, in pleasure, in oneness with, in union with all that is.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
that's what we were separated from. We were told it's all up here, right? The divine masculine is just up there. The divine masculine is just a, but the divine masculine is like the container, the spirit infused in life. And so the divine feminine is that recognition of life as divine, as pleasurable. And that's why my particular mission is around the embodiment of our divinity, because that is how we merge, right, the masculine and feminine on a global and individual level, is by
Mhm.
coming back into the embodiment of our divinity, of our truth, so that we
Mhm.
see the light in our form. We
Mhm.
see the energy, the light, the divinity in everything we ingest, in every person, and everything, and every experience. And there is no more separation.
Mhm. 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 Yes, I was just playing this mental picture in my head, right? So if this container, right? Okay. The water inside is feminine energy. Would you agree?
Yes.
If the container is masculine energy
On an energetic level, yes.
on an
Mm-hmm.
energetic level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like if if we do something, right? And masculine is the action or the borders, the protection of that. What's inside would be what's the spirit of it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I
Mm-hmm.
use this. Like the
Mm-hmm.
spirit of the water would be feminine. So
Mm-hmm.
what type of energy is this water? Is it loving? Is it compassionate? Is it empathetic? Or I could also, this water could also be ugly, terrible, harmful, toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So divine feminine energy is in alignment with the divine, right? Because I mentioned toxic, unhealed, all that. The spirit, your spirit, it is this is in the spirit of what you how you do something, right?
The
As I see
energy.
what's the energy, the spirit, all of that, right? Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the energy of what I of how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
I could we could have this podcast and I could be totally loving and nice to you, or I could have this podcast and be totally terrible and treat you poorly. So it
Mm-hmm.
is the spirit, the energy of how we do it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that is unseen
Mm-hmm.
because I can't touch that. I can't touch that. I can't touch that energy or that spirit. And I can't see it, but I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
How I make you feel it.
Mm-hmm. Is the invisible realm we're all playing in all the time, and we know it and we feel it, but somehow we're still blind to it because we've been so conditioned to see the physical. We've been so conditioned to focus on what our eyes take in. We've been so conditioned not to believe spirit is contained in matter. That's the split. That's the split.
There you got it. There you have it. That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, masculine is about building. So we have a lot of physical that we could see, but we're not understanding the spirit of the physical that we see. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, I think it is coming into alignment with both. You
Mm-hmm.
can't have one without the other. You just can't.
Well, and it's again going back to something you said earlier in the conversation around, we just have these bodies, we're not connecting to the soul and we're living as physical
Exactly.
beings. That is as a result of the lack of recognition of the divine feminine. That is the very specific result of the denial of the divine feminine, because that says we're just a body. It doesn't recognize the soul. And when we wake up to the soul, when we not only wake up, because a lot of people know they have souls but aren't living according to the soul. So
True.
when you choose to live according to that soul, that soul's truth, to tap into, to live from, to choose to live from, to align everything to that soul's truth. That's when you start living a miraculous, magical life.
Right. So I'm going to ask you a question. What about those people who say, I don't know if I have a soul. I don't believe in a soul. What do you say to that?
In a way, I have to be honest, it would be very hard for me to understand because I've never had that experience. I have always felt connected to my soul. So it's not
Mhm.
something I can say that I would be able to understand.
Mhm.
However, I do know people and have met people who aren't connected to their soul. And I would like to say there's a simple answer. I think that the soul could have even chosen to have an experience like that on purpose,
Mhm.
on a bigger, broader scale of their own need to experience that separation. And if the soul desires to experience that union with itself, it will probably place the circumstances, people, conversations in that soul's way so that they hear that, so that they may choose differently in this life when and if their soul is ready to have that new experience. And in order for someone to tap into the soul, they have to have a desire to do so.
Mhm.
And if that desire is not awoken or there, that's okay. That's what their soul's chosen. That's what they're experiencing this lifetime. That's fine. No judgment. Would
Mhm.
probably never be my client, right? Because I work with people who want that soul truth and soul freedom, but if they don't have the desire, they're not going to be devoted and they're not going to want to do the work. And that creates pain for me, though, when I recognize that, when I think about the state of humanity and the world is in, I know that the recognition of our souls is what will get us out of this and what will heal the planet and what will bring us back into union. And so that brings grief to my heart that there are people on this planet who do not want to recognize the soul or live according to the soul or align to love. And that breaks my heart
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it leads to suffering for all of us. Well, not to suffering for those of us who are awake, but it leads to the suffering that we witness, that we're aware of, that we're not blind to. And we're all affected, like it or not, by the earth being poisoned and by the food being toxic. We're all affected, whether we ingest it or not, because we're one with her.
Yes, so true. That is, and then it's difficult. It's difficult because you have to honor everybody's soul journey. But I know for me, I stay in observation mode a lot. I think that helps me a lot. I just become the observer. And you really have to honor people's journeys, because you have to choose divinity.
Mhm.
The Most High Creator wants you to choose divinity.
Mhm.
And it's not my job to force divinity upon you. You have to
Mhm.
choose it. It's a
Mhm.
choice, like you just said. And that's
Mhm.
the free will we're given. But it is, and when you settle in the heart and you see people suffering, when you like, oh, they just don't have to suffer. You just don't have to suffer. There's it's just, if you could just see it this way, but everybody's on a journey. And I have found that sometimes in the spiritual community, we want to wake everybody up. And we have to balance and honor where everyone is on their journey, because you have very new souls here and you have very old souls that have been journeying many, many lifetimes and probably have decided this is it for them. This is the last one and I'm not coming back. So you really have to just honor it. So I wanted to ask that question to you because I've posed that question before, and it's difficult.
Mhm.
So, Jessica, what is unconditional love to you?
I'm going to tie it back to what we just said, what you just said, because what you were just describing, I would wrap that up and add, it hurts when you see someone's blindness and how their blindness to their own divinity is what creates the capacity to harm others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led to the denial of the feminine, right? The warfare, the violence. That's what created the split we're all suffering from, experiencing now. And also in my own journey, as I was no longer blind to the divine within me, and as I literally over and over again aligned who I am to the truth that lives within me, and everything I do to this truth again and again and again, to be fully sovereign, to be fully in my power, fully in my truth, regardless of what another person sees or does not see. I know.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I will no longer allow the blindness of others to be my own. And therefore, I can stand in unconditional love as who and what I am and see that in them no matter what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because unconditional love is a presence we tap into. It is not something we do, it is something we feel, we experience, we surrender into, we live as we embody. As we were talking about earlier, we embody. And then in that embodiment, in that knowing, in that awareness, we allow that to be our vision. And we see everything through the eyes of our soul, no longer through our purely physical eyes. And when we do that, even those who cause suffering and harm, we recognize the love within them. We see beyond the illusion of form to the truth that lies underneath.
That's it. Yeah. I agree. No condition. And you see the God, the goddess, the oneness in them.
Mm-hmm.
Although this physical body is showing me Jessica, showing me a woman, showing me a white woman, showing me all these things she's been through, I see the goddess,
Mm-hmm.
the divinity in you. And
Mm-hmm.
when I could do that, I can we honor each other. We can honor the divinity in each other. And
Mm-hmm.
that is how you stay in that presence.
And you can only do that by first honoring the divine within.
Facts. That's it. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything starts with self. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everything starts with this. Because as you said, the body is our temple, it is
Yep.
our mini universe. And everything starts here. So, how you love yourself is how you teach others to love you and how you can love other people. So, if you could love yourself in a very deep, unconditional, divine way, that's the only way you could love other people in the same way. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only way. So,
Mm-hmm.
connection, embodiment is so important. I mean, it's the first stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first stop.
It's essential for freedom, for sure.
It is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have two questions and then we'll wrap it up. I could talk about this all day with you, but I know we're limited to time. So what book could you recommend to our listeners? It doesn't have to be about anything we've talked about today. It could be whatever you want, anything that might have helped you along the way. Whatever book you could recommend. And then I know
Oh
you have a
gosh.
book coming out as well. So, and just let us know how we could get that when it's ready.
Mm-hmm. So, gosh, I love so many books. It's really hard to choose one. I can think of my favorite author, Paulo Coelho. I don't
Okay.
know if you're familiar with any of his. He's a
I'm not.
Portuguese
Mm-mm.
writer. And he has so many books that I just love. He wrote The Alchemist. You may have heard of The Alchemist. He's that
Yeah,
author.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay.
Um, but
Yes.
he's written The Witch of Portobello. He's written When Veronica Dies. So many books that are soulfully written. They're
Mm-hmm.
usually fictional accounts, but they contain deep soul wisdom in each one. And I really love his books because they're pleasurable and feed my soul at the same
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And the book that I read right when I left the legal profession and gave everything up, literally everything, 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 to go to Europe on a spiritual pilgrimage, was Manuscript Found in Accra. And I was reading it on the plane back from a friend's wedding in California to Charlotte, where I lived. And I was like right on the edge of making the final decision to book my plane ticket. And I read that book on the plane, and there was something in there around fear. And that one line, I can't remember the exact wording, but there was that one line that just was like, okay, I'm not going to let my fear stop me, and I'm going to go back. And I booked the ticket to Paris, and I went on a spiritual
Yeah.
pilgrimage. So that
Yeah.
he's an author that stands out, and his books stand out because they've always come at really pivotal moments in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think books can take us on an experience. So
Mhm.
I'm always asking guests, to recommend a book. Speaking of your pilgrimage, can you share a little bit about that? What sacred sites did you go to? What came out of it?
We might need to have a whole other podcast on that.
Yeah, you can just give me the very short version.
I traveled to many sacred sites related to Mary Magdalene, including Glastonbury, La Sainte Baume, Rennes-le-Château. I also spent time in Greece connecting to Gaia, and lived in Belgium, and traveled to Portugal and Spain. And ended up in an abusive relationship while I was there. A
Mhm,
man I met at La Sainte Baume on the day I arrived, the day I dreamt I would arrive 7 months prior, who was a huge part of my spiritual journey
mm,
into identifying these subconscious beliefs, so
mhm,
that I transmit in my book, that I transmit in my work, so that we can reclaim our sovereignty. So had I not met him, had I not gone to La Sainte Baume, I consider him a gift from Magdalene, then I
mhm,
would not be doing what I'm doing. I would not be who I am, because that was a soul lesson, a soul journey that brought me into my truth and power.
mhm. Did
And
you
that's all
hit
in my book.
yeah, did you hit a rock bottom in that relationship? What was that pivotal point in that relationship that led you to your spiritual journey? Like what happened? Was it one incident? Was it one occurrence? Like what said, this is it, enough is enough, something has to be different?
When he tried to kill himself in front of me, and I was the only one left injured by trying to take the knife from him. And I woke up realizing I'm standing there going, he doesn't even know he hurt me. Like, he can't even acknowledge he hurt me. And I risked my life for him. Why?
Mm,
Why was I so willing to sacrifice myself for him? And very shortly after that, we went to Greece, and I literally felt the goddess say, come back to me. Come back to me. Come
mm.
back.
Yeah, that's another podcast.
That's another podcast.
Mm, that's a gosh, that's good. Okay, all right. So that's good stuff. I mean, and I think if anybody out there has truly felt a turning point, a supernatural experience, whether you heard it audibly, where you seen it visually, where you had a dream, and you knew that I have got to question this life I'm living, this is for you. And even her book. So tell us about your book and when it's going to be ready.
So I have an agent. He's working on finding the perfect publisher. So crossing my fingers, trusting the process, divine timing. I don't know when it will be out yet. Most likely, we're looking at a year and a half once the publisher accepts the book. It's called The
Okay.
Power of Eve: Heal the Wounds of the Feminine and Reclaim Your Sovereignty. And
Mhm.
it's my story interwoven with the story of the goddess, interwoven with these subconscious beliefs that are necessary to confront when returning to the life of the soul and sovereignty.
Yeah.
And I've spent 10 years living this, breathing this, writing this to transmit this. It is a transmission of embodied wisdom. I'm really excited for it to come out.
That's exciting. I'm really looking forward to the book myself. So please keep me posted on that as well. And then the last question I have is what is the greatest matter of your heart right now? At the time of this podcast, today is May 25th, 2023. Jessica, what is the greatest matter of your heart?
Hmm. Yesterday, I was really focusing on this because I feel my heart asking me to trust deeper levels of who I am than I've ever been able to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I feel like I'm on a precipice in my life and I'm willing to jump off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have nothing to cling on to other
Mm-hmm.
than this knowing. And so my heart is going, just trust me, just trust me, just trust this is who and what you are. Just trust me completely,
Mm-hmm.
completely. And so I'm surrendering into ways I can let go even more of external forms of security and knowing even more into this is what I am, and I trust in who and what I am completely.
Yeah. I think keep using the word surrender
Mhm.
every day. I think 2017, that was my word. Surrender, 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 surrender this. And I think we don't have to see the whole staircase. We just need the next step,
Mhm.
the next best step. You don't
Yep.
have to have it all figured out. I think we just need to make the next best step.
And the
And
soul
that
will always tell us every
yeah,
moment.
yeah. And I think sometimes we feel we have to see the whole staircase, but I think you mentioned that the knowing is what you had to fall back on, right? As a security. I think that's the best security. It doesn't
Mhm.
seem like it, right? Because of the physical world that we've been programmed to believe in. But if you know, then you know.
Mhm.
And that is more powerful than you could ever imagine. There were times in my life that I couldn't see many things, but I knew. And I just
Mhm.
stood on the knowing. So I think when you stand on the knowing, it's like, that's it. Because I'm planted, I'm here, and I'm firm in the knowing.
Mhm. That's the safety.
That's it. And
Mhm.
I think that's true safety, not illusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm. And it's
So, Jessica,
ecstasy.
yes, it is. How can our listeners reach out to you? How can they contact you if they are interested in your program? Let everyone know how to reach you.
So I'm on Instagram at the Path to Sovereignty. And there's a link in bio there, or you can go directly to the website, thepathtosovereignty.com. Just be careful spelling sovereignty. We always mix up the E and the I. So it's
It's a tough
SOVEREIGNTY.
one.
It's like little EI thing.
Yeah.
And at the website, then you can download a free gift if you'd like. You can access a free heart womb meditation to anchor into self. And it's a really good way to just connect more deeply to the heart womb wisdom, start that conversation. And I would say that's probably the best way to start. And I also have videos on YouTube. I'm constantly sending out podcast episodes. I have the Radically Embody Love podcast as well, and constantly sending out podcast episodes and YouTube videos that I do, and talks and blogs to really support people on their path to sovereignty. So
Yeah, it's awesome. It's definitely been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And it's just a joy. And it's just so, it just feels good when you can talk heart to heart to people who understand such a massive journey. And I haven't decided, but I think I want to call this podcast something like, you know, criminal defense attorney to spiritual mystic or something like that, because don't be afraid, guys. Don't be afraid to step out on the knowing, like Jessica said. Sometimes we're on a journey, and then we come to a hard stop, and sometimes our soul gives us that call. And you can choose to answer it, or you can choose to ignore it, but I guarantee you the call will become louder and louder and louder, and you will have to answer it. Just do not get to the point in your life where you have to, it's you're sick, or you're broken, and there's so much healing that you have to do, and you found yourself in a really bad place. So listen to those nudges, listen to those internal promptings. That is your spirit, that is your soul. So
mhm,
listen to that.
mhm.
So is there anything else you want to share, Jessica, before we cut it off?
Also, just that I'm so grateful for this soul to soul, heart to heart conversation. And I hope that the listeners can feel just that love with which we speak this, that we're encouraging you all to trust that part of yourself that doesn't make sense, to trust the desires that come within you, to trust your body, to trust the wisdom that lives within you, because what you do for you, you do for all of us. You
That
do for
is
all of us.
Hmm, that's so true. And what you heal individually, you heal collectively. So the
Mm-hmm.
more work we do on us, the more work we do on our body, our own internal universe, we are collectively helping the entire earth and this whole
Mm-hmm.
body of humanity. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
all
Such a
right, guys.
pleasure.
Yes, this has been another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. And remember, this podcast is inspired by love, relationships, spirituality, justice, culture, family, children, finances, freedom, personal growth, energy and vibration, universal principles, health, education, masculine and feminine, music, and all things of the heart and soul. This is how we connect our hearts with our minds for perfect alignment. So we'll catch you guys at the next episode. Take care.